Oh, could it be?
My passion for looter shooters has burned quite brightly for over 15 years, and Borderlands is the flame that lit the fuse. With Borderlands 4, Gearbox proves it still knows how to bring the boom. After fizzling somewhat with Borderlands 3, it felt like this series had begun to fall behind in the genre it pioneered. But breaking away from segmented levels and embracing an honest-to-goodness open world allows 2025's Borderlands to surprise us again. Drastically improved movement makes it one of the best-feeling first-person shooters out there. The story takes a refreshingly grounded approach that pays off.
Planet Kairos. Heard of it? Of course not.
And the expanded build crafting options like healing items, throwing knives, and weapon enhancements are all fantastic ideas. But taking these swings also comes with some unfortunate downsides, like how exploration is quite literally held back by invisible walls and awkward surfaces that refuse to be trod upon. Not to mention fairly rocky technical performance on the PC version provided for review, and numerous bugs.
Stop shooting my ride!
But those rough borders did little to keep me from once again falling head over heels for my first looter shooter love. And blasting through hordes of psychos with a friend or three feels as awesome as it ever has. If you're new to the absolute insanity that is Borderlands, it's a series where the weird enemies you mow down drop increasingly bizarre weapons that you then use to mow down even weirder enemies in an endless cycle of looting and shooting. How bizarre? It's stuff like this shotgun that fires sparkly stars that cover the ground in paint and enemies in elemental damage. Or maybe you'll luck into this sniper rifle that fires off rounds like a Gatling gun and stops consuming ammo while overheated. Borderlands 4 keeps that feeling fresh by continuing to iterate on the silly weapons it gives you, which can now cross-pollinate across different weapon manufacturers for even weirder outcomes. Borderlands 4 is a massive breath of fresh air, bordering on what almost seems like a soft reboot at times. It immediately adds some memorable characters to its cast, like the fancy and charming Levain, who has a somewhat messy dating history with your fellow Vault Hunters. But then every once in a while, it takes a welcome dip back into the nostalgia pool to have Claptrap rattle off a few jokes.
Ta-da! What do you think?
Love him or hate him, he's still here. With a few neat twists in store and a compelling plot about trying to free this planet, I ended up liking the story quite a bit, even if it doesn't hit the highs of Borderlands 2, especially in terms of its iconic villain.
Time to bolt.
Most of the action itself is what you'd expect from the series, but number 4 makes a number of pretty huge changes that shake up your vault hunting expedition. The biggest by far is the fact that Borderlands 4 is a proper open world game that's filled with side quests, timed activities, collectibles, and puzzles to seek out. You also have a whole bag of tricks to aid you in the exploration of Kairos' 4 diverse regions, like a grapple hook that lets you get to areas normally out of reach, a glider to soar over large swaths of land, and a vehicle you can summon on command to zip over hills and through deserts without having to hoof it to a catch-a-ride station first. That might not seem like a big deal at first, but it's hard to overstate how different this makes Borderlands 4 from its predecessors. Not just because you've got so many new ways to get around, but because progressing through the story and leveling up your character is so much less linear now. Sometimes I'd spend a few hours just exploring a new region of the map, clearing the fog of war and completing any activities I encountered along the way, while other times I'd race from place to place, focusing on one part of the main story quest line before pivoting to another part of it in a different region. That story took me about 40 hours to complete, but that was with plenty of distractions, and I've spent another 20 plus after the credits rolled, with lots still left to do. There is one major issue with this new open world philosophy that grinds my gears. It's just that the physical terrain of Kairos doesn't always rise to the occasion of these free-roaming ambitions. For example, some areas are filled with invisible walls that you'll unsatisfyingly slap into while you're trying to glide over a hill or mantle up a ledge. Borderlands has always had issues with its environments being a bit wonky, but it feels so much more noticeable in an open world where you assume you're meant to explore every nook and cranny, and most games come up with natural barriers like mountains or oceans to make it clear that you can go no farther. Instead, you quickly find the limitations of that exploration, and they feel artificial. Although I eventually learned to recognize when a surface was probably not something I was going to be allowed to interact with, it still bums me out that there isn't just some kind of out-of-bounds warning when going places I wasn't meant to. One other major area of evolution is combat, which not only has tighter, more responsive gunplay than any Borderlands game before it, but comes packed with a frankly silly number of new movement options that make battles much more dynamic. In addition to the existing ways to get around like running and sliding, you can now double jump, glide, grapple hook, dash in any direction, and even swim. That's right, water no longer instantly kills you, praise Moxie. It actually took me quite a while to remember all the new ways I was expected to navigate combat encounters, but with the help of some enemies that smartly push you to make full use of your options, I eventually learned to master them. By the end, I was soaring across the map, dodging attacks like a pro, and raining down hell upon my enemies. It became wonderfully satisfying stuff once I got the hang of it. Gearbox has also heaped an impressively high volume of new things to shoot into this game. There are little mechanical spiders that reflect all bullets you send their way when they spin their legs rapidly, creatures covered in crystals that are immune to damage until you shoot those crystals off and quickly destroy the floating orbs they turn into, and many others that I hadn't seen before. Those caused me to stop and adapt to their tactics in interesting ways, and that was always a memorable moment. Even better are the boss fights, which have evolved pretty significantly in that they usually involve some special mechanics you have to learn in order to beat them. These are often pretty simple things, like picking up and throwing a toxic bomb onto one boss to peel his armor off, or having to juggle yourself in the air with grappling and gliding after the floor becomes hazardous for a phase of another fight. Granted, they don't come close to the mechanical complexity of something you'd find in a Destiny raid, but those are often kind of over the top, and this is a significant step up from some of the basic dodge and shoot until it dies battles we've seen in Borderlands past. It's a happy medium, and that makes these bosses a lot less forgettable. That's not to say there aren't any basic fights, but it's fair to say that those can be an entertaining excuse to turn off your brain and blast something to bits, and serve as a contrast to the ones with an extra element to them. Rest assured, the major bosses usually step up their game pretty noticeably. It's also neat that you'll start encountering enemies with various modifiers as you get further into the adventure, and unlock higher difficulties via the endgame grind. These might be things like Elemental Eater, an effect that means enemies aren't just resistant to a specific type of attack, but healed by it, or Centripetal, which causes a black hole to form where an enemy with this trait dies, pulling everything in range into its center and dealing massive damage. It's not all new, groundbreaking stuff for Borderlands. These are similar to effects found in Borderlands 3's Mayhem mode, for instance, but they're now a central part of Borderlands 4, and that makes combat more interesting and has you staying a little bit more aware even of enemies you've seen a lot of already. If the fact that I've gone this long without even getting to discussing the entirely new batch of Vault Hunters in Borderlands 4 doesn't tell you there's a lot going on here, I don't know what will. It mostly sticks to tradition, but puts some pretty neat spins on the series' existing classes. There's the Siren Vex, who uses her space magic to deal elemental damage and has some awesome life-stealing options. Rafa, the Exo Soldier, who can summon all sorts of digi-structed weapons, from shoulder-mounted turrets to melee arm blades, as though Borderlands didn't have enough weapons already. Harlow, a Gravitar with an assortment of gravity manipulation abilities that can trap enemies in bubbles, among other things. And Amon, a massive cybernetically enhanced warrior called a Forge Knight, who has a bunch of melee options at his disposal. Each one feels pretty good, with unique tools that make them all viable choices for endgame activities without feeling especially overpowered. While I've been pretty high on it so far, I do have some complaints to lodge as someone who tends to play this kind of game more than once, and with an eye toward making each of those playthroughs feel distinct. After a few dozen hours with it, it strikes me that Borderlands 4's build crafting hasn't pushed the series into the realm of something like Diablo, or dare I say it, Path of Exile, given that there are a few branching paths to choose from in each Vault Hunter skill trees that you can then optimize with gear to excel at a handful of specific things like dealing loads of elemental damage or healing yourself when getting kills, but not enough customization options to really go wild. That said, the 3 different trees each character does have each at least add a little bit of variety to how every class can play, meaning more than one person on your team can use the same Vault Hunter while having a different set of buffs and abilities that can make them work well together. For example, for the first half of my playthrough, I focused on Vex's spectral summoning tree to deploy ghostly doppelgangers onto the battlefield. But after finding a legendary item that worked well for a different kind of build, I respec'd into the elemental DPS tree that focused on casting powerful spells instead of summoning others to do my bidding. If those 2 different characters work together side by side, there'd be little overlap in what they're bringing to an up to 4-person team. Ah yes, teams. Although Borderlands 4 feels great to play solo as well, for sure the best way to play is when among friends, and those who play together should expect to experience bugs together. The vast majority of my time in Borderlands was spent with friends, and we encountered just about every issue in the online multiplayer book. Lag and desyncing from combat, if you're not the host, enemies sometimes becoming immune to damage or teleporting around the map, and non-host players losing progress or getting kicked out of quest lines because something didn't track properly, just to name a few. Some of this, like the fact that you don't uncover the map in your own save file while exploring with friends, seem like it might be intentional, but is still deeply annoying and disincentivizes teaming up. Other issues, like equipment selling vending machines that consistently offered no wares at all for any of us while in co-op, are just head-scratching pains in the neck. There were times when I hit enough issues in succession where it became preferable to just play solo, and others where it created friction when deciding who'd be the group's host because we knew that person would see the fewest problems. That's definitely not the kind of dynamic you want in your co-op game, and it caused my group no small amount of grief as we discovered the various ways in which things feel not so great when playing together, despite gunplay and synergizing our builds with one another otherwise being really awesome. Granted, some of this is the result of playing a short time before launch, and there will certainly be at least a few fixes by the time you play it, but if history is any lesson, it will be a minute before all of this is ironed out. Playing solo is smoother, but there's no escape from all the problems because Borderlands 4 is a fairly buggy ride in general. It seems like there are as many bugs as there are guns, and the longer you play, the more likely you are to see things like infrequent but severe frame rate hitching, or your backpack suddenly deciding you have way less space for equipment than you should until you back out to the menu and reload. 2 of my crew even found themselves locked out of the endgame grind when different steps in the quest line broke, blocking their progression and making it so we couldn't run the activities we wanted to do together. It's a testament to just how fun exploring Kairos is that even after all of that laundry list, I still couldn't wait to play more even after dozens of hours. You've got to take these complaints in context. Speaking of the endgame grind, Borderlands 4 appears to come preloaded with one of those. Although I said the same thing about Diablo 4. You can't call them all, alright? But I'm feeling optimistic. There are 3 activities you're expected to complete weekly, a more challenging version of a story mission that has a bunch of tricky modifiers, like one where all enemies explode into those black holes of damage, and another where enemies heal themselves when dealing damage to your team. Then there's a repeatable boss fight that mostly seems like it's there to give you a straightforward enemy to kill as many times as you'd like for great drops, and a hidden vending machine that moves around each week and sells guaranteed legendary loot. As you grind these activities, you'll also unlock the more advanced world tier difficulties that offer better rewards, but these are gate-kept behind incredibly challenging quests with loads of modifiers that are the ultimate test of your loadout and shooting skills. At this point, none of these things are particularly deep or time-consuming since you just run them all each week and then are basically done. But even if that's not your thing, there's still a massive map that has lots of side activities for you to complete out of the box. Are there still boxes? Beyond that, we have promises that Gearbox has a fairly good track record of delivering on, courtesy of a post-launch roadmap which includes plenty of content on the way. I have a lot of hope that Borderlands 4 will have legs for quite some time.
Don't worry, I'm already on my way. You're gonna make it through this. Please!
Borderlands 4 is a badass open-world evolution of a wonderfully unhinged looter-shooter series that needed to try something new, and it largely nails the biggest swings it takes. Combat is slicker than ever thanks to exciting new movement options and some interesting enemy designs. And the entertaining story takes things in a fresh direction while still tying neatly into existing lore. The transition to an open world isn't the smoothest, especially when troubling terrain with a few too many invisible walls can make it feel like these environments are all for show, but that's more than worth putting up with in exchange for being able to chart your own path and freely explore the wacky, violent world of Kairos. The bugs my crew and I encountered were bad enough to occasionally sour our co-op groove, but in between them, we had a great time. And my friends and I have found ourselves utterly at the mercy of this new loot grind. The Borderlands series feels like it's been a bit stuck in the mud for some time now, and especially after a few patches, Borderlands 4 is exactly the kick in the pants it has needed.
Executive Reviews editor Tom Marks here with Travis Northup, our reviewer for Borderlands 4, to talk about your review, your tastes in the genre, that sort of thing. We've talked to you a couple times for these review interviews, Travis, but I think this is the first time that we've talked to you about a looter shooter, which is weird to me because I almost see that as your bread and butter genre. You've been our Destiny 2 reviewer forever. You reviewed Tiny Tina's Wonderland and the Borderlands saga as well. A bunch of other shooters. You are well versed in this genre. So I guess let's start with the basics. Why did you want to review Borderlands? What drew you to this series and you know, actually wanting to review it rather than just be playing it?
Yeah, as you pointed out, I sort of cut my teeth in the games industry by being the guy who knew about looter shooters. And that is because in order to know about looter shooters, you have to have a very obsessive personality and be willing to go as deep down the rabbit hole as anybody could go. And that is my personality. And so I sort of became known as the guy who just knew about these things. And the first one that I got really, really deep into before the days of Destiny or any of that stuff was Borderlands. I was a huge fan of the first Borderlands. Very flawed game, has not aged well at all if you try to play it today. But it was the first one of its kind. Let's take the idea of a Diablo-like ARPG and let's make that a first-person shooter. And to me, that was like the dream game I had always hoped would one day become a real thing. And I played the heck out of Borderlands. And then Borderlands 2 was really the life-changing game for me, because that game is actually fantastic, like masterpiece level game, and it accomplishes a few things. The reason I wanted to review Borderlands 4 is A, I'm a huge fan of the series, B, looter shooters are absolutely my jam, and C, there are just not enough comedy games.
Well, then let's talk about Borderlands 3, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because you alluded to in your review that you thought Borderlands needed a shakeup, like it was getting a little stale, it needed this breath of fresh air that Borderlands 4 provides, but what was it about Borderlands 3 that you thought missed the mark in that way?
Yeah, so whereas Borderlands and Borderlands 2 were sort of pioneers of their industry, it actually didn't go straight to Borderlands 3. There were other games and long gaps, including the pre-sequel that came out after Borderlands 2.
Right.
And the pre-sequel, I sort of feel the same way I feel about Borderlands 3, which is that it was fine and it was a lot of fun, but it really did not do anything to move the genre forward. And by the time Borderlands 3 came out, Borderlands as a series was starting to feel like it was way behind in the genre that it pioneered, right? And so a lot of stuff happened in between Borderlands 2 and 3. There was the pre-sequel, which was basically just a, hey, here's more Borderlands 2 while you wait, right? And then there was a long gap wherein there were live service looter shooters, and I think The Division came out, and like there were just all these other games. And so by the time you play Borderlands 3, you're like, oh yeah, that game that started this series, I definitely want to play that. And then you actually play it and you go, why don't they have any of the stuff in all of the other looter shooters I played in? So it just felt very different. They had the gunplay as a major improvement, but in a lot of the other areas, it felt like it was pretty stuck in the mud, a little backwards thinking. And then when you combine that with the fact that the story was like a complete flop, unfortunately, it just ended up being not my favorite game in the series.
So let's move away from Borderlands as a series for now, and look at kind of looter shooters in general. What do you look for in a looter shooter? What do you think makes the genre tick? Is it interesting loot? Is it that replayability of the end game? Is it the story? Like, what part of this do you think is kind of the most crucial to you, or is it a hodgepodge?
Yeah, as I wrote in a feature for IGN recently, the two most important things in a looter shooter are looting and shooting. And
Fair enough.
I think it's really in the name. And like for the first one, looting, I would actually say it's the most important part, because even if the shooting isn't great, like take Borderlands 1, not great combat. Even Borderlands 2, by today's standards, is pretty bad mechanically at the FPS part of it. But when you kill something and 19 guns pop out of its head and one of them glows and makes a noise, that sort of makes up for any shortcomings. And so I would say the looting is really the most important part. Is like, does this have loot that you want to chase? Does it have those moments where you're like, what? I didn't even know this was in the game. This is crazy. And it kind of blows your mind. And then the shooting is secondary, which is, you know, it has to feel good. It has to be a fun shooter that you would want to play for hundreds of hours. Yeah, that's what I would say. Everything else is just icing on the cake.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially coming from you, because you also do most of, I think, our ARPG reviews, like Diablo, like Path of Exile, those sorts of things. So it does not surprise me that you'd want more of the RPG side of that.
Yeah. I'm always hoping they'll lean into it, but it's funny. Every time you interview a looter shooter developer, they always go, we're a shooter first. And I'm always like, do you have to be, though? Let's be Larry. Do you have to be? But yeah, I get it.
That makes total sense. Travis, thank you very much for joining us, talking with us a little bit more about this in the review. If you want to check out Travis's last review, I believe it was Wildgate a little bit over a month ago. You had a little bit of a break there. You also, I think, reviewed 4 games in a row around that time, so you needed a little bit of a break. And then for a different kind of action game recently, we reviewed Lost Soul Aside, so you can check that review out as well. For everything else, stick with IGN.